So here we go. For anyone new to the channel, the usual idea that we go with here is we usually have a specific focus that we go for each and every single day, as long as it's not a tournament day. And for today, it's going to be a Skaven weapon teams focus, playing on my ranked ladder, and maybe even contacting some clanmates to get some practice games in. But for now, we're up against our opponent, CCK Roscoe. And we're just going to be advancing, trying to gun down his Empire Knights. We have Poison Wind Globadiers. We have the Brood Horror that will be quite effective in this situation, and many Warp Fire Throwers. For Franz, he's not especially scary, since we do have so many of our... we have so many guns just really able to support. Franz can't really get in too close, lest he get gunned down. And as for the cavalry, they'll be mostly just marching to their doom at this point. They have a really hard time actually engaging on top of... They have a really hard time engaging on top of Warp Fire Throwers. We're going to be using that to our advantage. As for Squulk, he's going to be routing off many of the infantry troops and heroes of the Empire. We need to get him into a better position first, though, so that he can use his Liber Bubonicus. And for our Brood Horror, we'll want to rout off some cavalry soon enough, so we're going to be keeping a close eye on that to see where we can pull that off. Now, already we've routed off many of the Empire forces. We've taken care of the cavalry, and essentially it's just dealing with Franz now. Our Wolf Rats will be chasing off these Reichsguard, and we'll be using them late game to chase off all this infantry as they begin rallying. As for Franz, he's taking a little bit too much gunfire to really hold his own, and the Warrior Priests should lose to Skrull, although I imagine that fight may be a little bit close for comfort. Nevertheless, our weapon teams are now rallying on the fringes. That's basically all we need to close out the game now. The Skaven, renowned for how easy they are to rout, but pretty often you'll see them coming back to win the day for you. And it's especially good for weapon teams, since their power usually doesn't degrade after they rout. So a pretty clean initial game. We just have to round up these war wagons. Then a unit of Mordor war wagons. We'll chase them off with Brood Horror, and from there it will likely be army losses for the Empire. Essentially just really focusing on that ranged firepower to win out the day. And even with this tiny hill in the way, they are actually still able to get in a lot of their damage. So there we go, Brood Horror shutting down the war wagons. These Reichsguard will be routing off in just a second. It's Warrior, actually an Empire Captain, not a Warrior Priest, going to be getting gunned down. And there we go, army loss is kicking in, and a solid first win of the day. Sick. Wonderful. And nice. Move on to the next game. Usually I do prefer running this build on a more flat map, but it's still quite effective. Nonetheless, we have so many weapon teams here that you usually have more weapon teams than your opponent has infantry. And because a single Warp Fire Thrower can usually melt down any infantry unit before they make contact, you usually actually win the frontline fight despite only having a few Skaven slaves. Pretty amazing. And yeah, it's just about not getting overwhelmed. So there we go. I think my Wolf Rat micro probably could have been better, but all my guns did pretty good, especially those Globadiers actually. Some very high damages there. The next game now going to be Wood Elves against the Vampire Counts. We have a mass archer build with Tempest to shut down flyers like these Fellbats. Our archers can shoot out targets like the Crypt Horrors, and the cavalry fight should be won by our skirmishing corps here. We have some elite cavalry at the ready. We're going to start off by cycle charging some zombies. They may eat some spirit leeches, but actually the Lord here does not have any spirit leeches on him, which is quite good for us. Means our cavalry can dive in and out safely without getting poked down. As for all his infantry, we can just continue to cycle charge in and out of them. Some of our troops might get caught, but the zombies have low enough DPS where it's not especially a problem. So here we go. Just continuing to bounce in and out. We do have to worry a tiny bit about the hex rates, but shouldn't be too much of a problem. Now, the vampire counts are getting... That's weird. Why can't I move my army? There we go. For some reason my alt button wasn't working. But yeah, so the hex rates are coming in. Going to group up our cavalry now and give them the Loix blessing. That should stealth them up, and then we can use them to countercharge into all this cavalry. Should be a fairly effective trade, and we'll be chasing them off with our archers just to make sure that they get punished for coming in so close. And immediately after, it's just going to be another disengage. Oh my goodness, what's happening with my army? Why is it so okay, so something weird is happening here where my alt button wasn't working, but I think it's working now. For anyone wondering, if you want to reform your army, or if you want to move your army and reposition them without breaking formation, usually hit alt and then drag to move them into position. It's a very strong tactic for keeping your for keeping that formation strong, and to make sure that you don't clump up, as that is generally a pretty bad situation in Warhammer, since there are many AoEs that can come down and ruin your day. You have to be quite careful. Now, some scraps are coming down onto my archers, but we do have quite a few of them, and they are the rather cheap variant. So in this case, it's not too much of a worry. As for these fell bats, they will be diving in onto me too. But we can hit one of them with the Tempest. The others will likely be able to land on my archers, but not before they get a lot of damage on these knights. Then we'll move in with our cavalry to peel off the bats, and to make sure our cavalry doesn't get compromised, we're sending in our spears into the center area so that they can stop the vampire counts from advancing. And there we go. Looks like everything's going according to plan. We've disintegrated many of the bats here. Some of the crypt horrors are trying to push through, but they will be taking a lot of damage trying to disengage from my spears. And not to mention, our cavalry is still fairly strong here too. We have tons of archer support, and it should be a pretty clean win from here. I guess we just need to focus fire priority targets at this point, like the Mortis engine. And after that, keeping our Lord alive is going to be another priority. We're going to send in our cavalry to save her, because we do have a lot of winds of magic left, and we definitely don't want to be losing that. The healing is going to be very important for keeping our cavalry alive. So it's worth it to sacrifice some of our skirmishers here to make sure that our caster makes it out alive without getting Vargul. After that, it should disintegrate, and I think we are on the verge of pushing our opponent into army losses now. Should be pretty straightforward in terms of what could actually come back here. Probably not too much, especially if we can keep our cavalry alive. So we'll just pull them back and just focus fire the White Kings now. If we were lower on ammunition, we would position a little bit closer to them just to make sure that all of our shots hit. But in this case, it's not too important. We have loads of extra ammunition left, and then we should be good. This is generally regarded as a pretty bad matchup for the vampire counts, just because they can get shot up really hard by the archers, and they will have a pretty hard time actually engaging and shutting down archers, because their units are rather slow. So there we go. Finishing up all the units. GG from our opponent. And a nice 2-0 victory to start off the day. Pretty nice. And there we go. The Tempest is really good for shutting down any flying lords. And my opponent was ready for that. He didn't take any Dragon Lords because of that sniping potential. But I think he was more prepared to face a box instead of a mass archer build. And then that really didn't work out well for them. You can see their cavalry didn't really pay out for themselves. And after that, my archers were able to really just ruin the day of the counts today. Now this next match is up against Canadian Ace 13, our next opponent of today. They're going to be bringing the Empire, where we have counterpicked with Skaven. The same weapon teams build that we ran earlier, and it's very in line with my old Vampire Coast playstyle. Just really focusing on having so much DPS that that your range units are able to defend themselves. That's going to be a whole ton of warp fire throwers, a bunch of rattling guns, Giselles, and so on. And units like Volkmar won't really be able to dive into the back line. Even cavalry too, Empire Knights, can run into some issues trying to dive in, just because warp fire throwers can actually do pretty good damage to large units. Now, starting off the game, whenever you see a cannon, you always want to be dodging with your single entities back and forth, just to make sure that it doesn't get more value than it needs to. That it will have to focus on your infantry. That will generally work out quite well. There are some pistoliers on the side. Have to make sure that our warp fire throwers don't get compromised there. We'll move in our Skaven slaves to body block and shield for our troops. Still going to be a rather slow engage though towards the Empire. And first things first, I guess we'll send our Giselles to fire in on the Bright Wizard or these Knights of the Blazing Sun. The Brood Horror is a defensive unit, and we won't be trying to send it into the back, since usually it will actually die if you attempt that. Our Rattling Guns can defend against the Pistoliers quite well. We'll turn some Giselles too to really lock them down. We want to get our Warp Fire Throwers shooting as soon as possible, so continued advance towards our opponent is going to be important. You can see the Pistoliers getting shut down by the Rattling Guns. Working out quite well. A Burning Head might go down. We'll just split up some of our troops. A Fireball coming into the Warp Fire Throwers, so we'll split them up so that they can dodge a little bit better. And Skulk is going to move up so that he can start throwing down summons. All going to plan. Now the Knights are coming in, and the response to this is sending in 2 of our Warp Fire Throwers to focus them down, and the Brood Horror to stop them too. If we had Rattling Guns, that'd be good, but you can see already the Warp Fire Throwers are really more than enough to handle out this situation. The Knights have fallen, but not before getting a lot of damage on the Brood Horror. Nevertheless, Volkmar is in a little bit of an open position. We may be able to focus him down with our guns. As for the Pistoliers, they are actually getting a bit more damage than I would like onto my guns. We'll just turn them so that they can better deal with that. And then yeah, it's just going to be a continued advance. We've routed off the Empire front line, and we should be onto their back line soon enough. The Brood Horror is back too, and we can even throw down more summons to really shut down the front line and to jump onto the artillery. Squall will be okay fighting Volkmar. We're fine taking that engagement. And as for these Empire Knights, since they are diving into the back line, we're going to have to focus them down with our guns. Optimally, we would have already been facing them to actually stop them from diving into one of my Warp Fire Throwers. But this isn't the worst case scenario either. We're still able to get in a lot of damage, and that should be good. Now, the Sigmar Suns have jumped onto some of my ranged troops. That can occasionally happen and cause a lot of problems, but you can usually shut them down with the Wolf Rats. They do really nice for cleanup by just essentially just with their charge bonus, charging on top of those Sigmar Suns and cleaning them up so that your guns can actually continue firing. As for Volkmar, Skolk has managed to defeat him, and with the artillery finally down, we're feeling a little bit more comfortable. There are a lot of Empire Knights in our backline, but we have enough of our guns available where they are able to shut them down fairly well, just getting them to rout. And as soon as they rout, we're good to go. Just because once they rally and come back, they'll actually have so little HP that they can't really dive onto your guns again, as long as you're careful with them. So there we go, all working out just fine. Volkmar will be taking a lot of damage from Skrull. We're using all of his abilities really to shut that down. Pistoliers will have a hard time actually shutting down my weapon teams. And it's really just the single entities left for the Empire. It's still a little bit scary. Things could still go either way, just because the single entities can be quite strong. But if we actually manage to keep a Rattling Gun alive, which we do have, it will be able to do really well against Volkmar and this Warrior Priest. So that's the plan. The Globadiers will just be doing their thing, keeping any Empire infantry forces from coming back. And we even have our Brood Horror, which managed to survive, surprisingly enough, against the forces of the Empire. I actually would have thought that it would get routed off earlier, but lucky for us, it still manages to stay online. That will work out quite well. Some Empire Knights are moving in onto my Globadiers, but some Poisoned Wind will be able to take care of them. They should get routed off pretty easily, and we'll even turn our Rattling Guns to shut them down. As for this Fire Mage, the Bright Wizard, we can chase them off with Wolf Rats. They actually die fairly quickly to that, so I expect that to go well. And as for Skrull, he is winning his fight against Volkmar. There we go, you can see we routed off the Knights. And now it's focus firing the single entities of the Empire, although it is going to be army losses and another victory for ourselves. And there we go. Yeah, essentially, you just want to make sure that your Rattling Guns and your Warp Fire Throwers are turned and ready to fire before they get engaged on. I actually mismicroed a tiny bit and wasn't able to secure that positioning in a few of the areas, just because I'm still getting used to the build. But you can still do quite well there. When actually used effectively, you can see here the Warp Fire Throwers can do insane damage, 1,700 damage value. And when they're mismicroed, they'll usually get much lower values, stuff like 300, 62, and 300 again. They are a very hit or miss unit, and it's really important that you micro them correctly. So there we go, on to the next game. Now, here we go. We're up against Chaos. Gone for a kite build, and they've gone for a lot of anti-skirmish tools. Actually, quite a few hounds. That's not too worrisome. There's no hell cannon. Definitely good. And if we can take out these Marauder Horsemen with our Way Watchers, that'll give us a pretty nice initial lead. This is a Twilight with her splash attacks. Will hit the Horsemen for quite a bit. And if she does take a lot of skirmish damage, she can even heal up. So in general, pretty nice. We've gone a lot of initial early damage onto the Warriors of Chaos, but we need to be retreating from the infantry. Otherwise, they will be able to catch my spears and actually do a lot of damage to them. The edge of the map is over here, and we'll see if we can actually position in a way that that allows us to sneak up along this way. We'll be using our cavalry now to move in. The Sisters of Twilight will be trying to figure out the situation, and I just noticed we have forgotten our caster. A common problem that is often done by me, but we'll still make use of the extra funds as best as we can. And we'll just really have to make sure that our cavalry doesn't take too much damage. The Way Watchers will be continuing to fire along here. And some wolves are coming in, but we have spears at the ready to block. For the Way Watchers, that's really no problem. The real problem is that the frontline fight is actually getting underway. We are taking quite a bit of damage. A big burning head does come in too. The Dragon Ogres are moving in. They'll be diving on top of my cavalry. And we want to pull back since they do indeed do quite a bit of magic damage. And we don't want to be taking too much damage on our Sylvan Knights for sure. Forsaken are moving in, but our cavalry has managed to escape. They will be able to start cycle charging the Forsaken, and for the Sisters of Twilight, they'll be able to push back these Marauder Horsemen. Our Way Watchers can continue to, I guess, probably pressure these the cavalry skirmishers, since they will be posing a threat to the Sisters of Twilight. And then the next target is going to be focusing on these Dragon Ogre Shaggots. For now, it's the Marauder Horsemen that we need to deal with. We'll send in the Sisters of Twilight into melee with them. And we're doing this because it will group them up, and then a volley from the Way Watchers will be able to clear them out. We will be losing many of our spear units, but as long as we have a couple units of spears left, we shouldn't be too worried. Another spell looking like it almost went down, aiming for my Way Watchers, but not too much of a problem. We should be able to dodge that fairly well. Shaggots will be moving in, but not before taking a ton of volleys from our Way Watchers, and we can even slow them with the Arawara Way Watchers, who are quite good for that reason. If something dives in on top of them, they actually have a pretty clean disengage. And there we go, with the Sisters of Twilight diving in. We've managed to rout off the Dragon Ogres. Summoners of Rage will be chasing them off. And now it's just mostly infantry for the Warriors of Chaos. The Shaggots are now down, or the Dragon Ogres. Our Sylvan Knights don't have too many threats. And even though our Way Stalker is getting compromised, we'll be able to shoot these Chaos Marauders in the back. Absolutely no problem. This is a Twilight 2 can start sniping out their targets, and it's just Sigvald. Sigvald is still quite a threat, and you'll have to be pretty careful of him. But I think with the remaining ammunition, there isn't too much that we really have to worry about coming in from him. Not to mention, we also have this unit of Glade Guard that can focus him down. And the Sisters of Twilight, they do take a fireball to the face, but it triggers their healing proc, actually. And that should actually bring the balance of power heavily into our favor as soon as they get healed. The Sisters of Twilight are really good in a counter skirmish situation because of that. And in just a second, they should get that nice heal, and we can use them to charge the Chaos Marauders in the back. There we go. The heal does go down. And since the Sisters of Twilight didn't rout off, that will likely be game here. I'm expecting army losses to trigger real soon for our opponent. And if it doesn't, we just need to get a solid volley on Sigvald to actually secure that. So to do that, we'll slow him down. Turn fire with our Way Watchers, since they'll be firing into his back and he won't be able to block it. And then that should be a pretty nice amount of damage. The Sisters of Twilight, we focus firing him too. And given that he is slowed, there's no real position for him to dodge. He's now at extremely low HP. And he'll be going down, sadly, before he manages to actually get into combat. Alright, so there we go. There we go. Another pretty clean win, essentially. Just a fun old kite game with some Way Watchers. They got insane value there. The Sisters of Twilight 2 doing really well. And we were just able to pick off a lot of these Marauder Horsemen, essentially. As for the infantry, they never really got to fight. Poor Sigvald didn't get a ton of value. And even though the Ogres did actually manage to charge a few of my troops, we were able to shut them down before losing too many Sylvan Knights. So here we go. It's a Skaven build against our next opponent, Grenadier. Going in for a similar type of gun build, weapon team build, except this time with many gutter runners to kite out the Wood Elves. They should be able to keep the Sisters of Twilight back, and that will make sure that our Gracier doesn't get shut down too hard. There are some cavalry skirmishers too coming in from the Wood Elves. They're not too much of a problem, and we'll be able to keep them back with our Wolf Rats. As for these Wild Riders, we can shut them down with the Warp Fire Throwers that will be turning to face them, and our Skirmishers will just be pressuring the Sisters of Twilight. Actually, oh my goodness, taking out a third of their HP in a single volley. Pretty huge initial play. The Wolf Rats don't want to take too much damage from these Glade Riders, so we'll take care of that. Just be a bit careful. As for the Sisters of Twilight, we'll just keep chasing them down with Gutter Runners, which should be able to actually cause a lot of problems there. They may even get routed off, and if they do, we're going to chase them with our Wolf Rats. That's going to be the plan. Blade Riders moving in, getting caught up by the summon of my Ixcha's Triads. The Sisters of Twilight are very nearly routed off. Our Globadiers are going to move in to pressure the Wood Elf Infantry without too much worry, since they actually do have quite a bit of armor, which will do well against that front line. As for our Warp Fire Throwers over here, they'll be able to move in too, and hopefully help out. And our Warp Fire Throwers can start hitting up these Wild Riders. Same with our Wolf Rats and the Ixcha's Triads. And we can even bring in more Wolf Rats to actually make sure we can chase them off. Our Lord, I guess he'll be throwing in a summon to shut down the Wild Riders to really make sure that they aren't able to stay effective. And we should be good after that. That's the core of the Wood Elf Infantry Force. It's the core of the Wood Elf Cavalry Force. And with the Sisters of Twilight so low, there's not a ton of sniping potential left for my opponent. Of course, this front line is still quite scary, the Glade Guard specifically, and be pretty dangerous against my forces. But these Glade Riders are pretty inefficient against all the weapon teams. Just a little bit too much armor for them to deal with. As for the spear units of my opponent, we'll just be kiting away from them, just retreating where we can. And with the Sisters of Twilight very nearly routed off, we're going to try and get our Wolf Rats into position to actually chase them down. The Wolf Rats will do really well in the infantry fights too. So we'll see if we can get them into position for that. And then we'll hopefully do well. The Sisters of Twilight, they actually don't have their healing ability. So they're actually basically dead. They'll be routing off the map, no problem. Warp Fire Throwers will keep the cavalry back. And with our Wolf Rats finally in the back lines of the Wood Elves, I think we have more or less secured ourselves the victory. There is Ariel, which I did not account for, and she will be a little bit of an issue since I did not prepare much in the way of dealing with single entities. My Warp Fire Throwers do get compromised too, but this is a little bit of a bait. A little bit mistimed from me though, just because my Wolf Rats couldn't get in time. But like I said, they have very high armor values, and since they do allow my Wolf Rats to countercharge the Glade Riders, we should expect to actually trade up in that situation. Generally, all around, things going quite good. We'll be able to chase off the rest of the Wood Elves using our Rats. And then it's going to be dealing with Ariel, the ultimate boss in the late game. She is a very powerful single entity lord, and you really need a lot of ranged firepower to take her out. So I guess with all the Gutter Runners, we're going to turn off Fire at Will with them, so that they have as much ammunition as possible to take out Ariel. He doesn't have a ton of armor, so I'm fairly confident that our remaining Gutter Runner ammunition will be able to take her out. So that shouldn't be a problem. Sisters of Twilight too. We just want to chase them off with the Wolf Rats. We'll see if camping directly beneath them actually gets them into a position where we can rout them off. As for Ariel, she does have her unit of Eternal Guard, which will be able to... Oh, there we go. Sisters of Twilight are gone. Yeah, she does have her unit of Eternal Guard, which will be able to keep her safe, but we have actually pushed our opponent into army losses. So that's actually pretty good. We save up on a lot of value not having to shoot the Eternal Guard, and our opponent taps out since we did have many tools to actually take out Ariel. We had the halberd summons from our lord, tons of warp fire throwers, which are actually pretty decent at killing her, and many gutter runners with good ammunition left. So there we go, win against the Wood Elves. Essentially really relying on the gutter runners to do well. Deepwood Scouts would have actually been able to punish them, but we also had wolf rats, so we weren't without option. But before we dive into that discussion, we'll have to get started with the game, with the Wood Elves against the Dowie, coming in with a kite build against them, with only 2 melee troops, plus our lord, who will be dodging as best as she can against the mass cannons against the dwarves. Actually, just 2 cannons, which means that we should actually be advancing as quickly as we can. Try and take them out. We're going to be hiding our lord so that she can't get targeted down. Just a little bit of dodging, and then a soul quench to take out one of the models. As for the arrows of Kronos, I took out another cannon model, and even if the artillery is dropped, we'll still be able to hit the artillery. The soul quench is actually homing, and because of that, it's basically impossible to dodge. So there are still 4 cannon units left, and some quarrelers. Bugman's Rangers even have revealed themselves. We'll be dancing with our lord just to negate their damage, and then once our range units actually come into play, they'll be able to start firing in on top of them and hopefully taking out many of their models out. Once the Bugmans actually turn to fire at my Glade Guard, that is when we're going to soul quench them, hopefully take out many of their models. So you can see here, firing into their unshielded sides, but they actually do retreat and fall back into a safer position. Pretty nice play for my opponent, but he's about to get soul quenched along the side, and that should be quite painful here. Soul quench down the side of infantry units will do a lot of damage, and see those rangers taking a pretty good beating to start off with. The cannons will be able to continue firing in on my troops, but they don't do a lot of damage to the spaghetti lines of these Glade Guard. We're using our channeling staff so that we can get more soul quenches out, and our Way Watchers are nearly in position. They are quite key to pulling out getting a victory here, because we can use them to snipe out the cannons. So we'll be focus firing that cannon crew. It will allow our lord to it'll make it so we don't have to micro our lord as much, and it'll make sure that the chip damage coming in from the dwarves is reduced as much as possible. This will give me a lot of time to really just focus on being really efficient with my ammunition, and that should be able to lead us to a pretty clean victory. So the Way Watchers are just scooting up a tiny bit so that they can take out the other cannon model. A single volley should be able to take care of it. And our massed line of fire here will likely be able to take out this unit of rangers. We've just grouped up with our lines, and since some of these rangers are actually firing in on my lord, they aren't actually able to support their frontline rangers, and it should be a pretty effective trade for us. We can even move in the Way Watchers a little bit closer to take them out, and even though they are retreating, it will not be enough, because all we have to do now is just continue moving up with our range units to get into position to fire in. The rangers are facing my lord, which means that they will be unshielded, and a single volley is going to be taking them out. Same thing with this unit of rangers here. A single volley of Way Watcher fire brings them down to nearly dead, and I think we can even soul quench the last unit of rangers to take them out. We don't really need to use healing since our lord HP is much less important. And there we go. That's the last of those guys. Now we begin the kite game proper, with our infantry retreating back and us just chasing off the remaining range units of my opponent. The Way Watchers will be running back too, and there's no more ranged firepower for our opponent. And what that means is that our Sylvan Knights can actually start coming into play and cycle charging the poor dwarf infantry here. There's not much that they can do to really stop that. And as for the rest of this infantry corps, we have our war dancers moving in to take them out. So that's going to be the plan. We'll loose a volley onto these Longbeards just because they're unshielded on that front. And Sylvan Knights can actually move in to start routing things off. Our Glade Guard will be able to do quite well. And our Lord is just having a fun time chasing off some dwarf units. Some Slayers will be catching a few of my Way Watchers. We'll bring in the Sylvan Knights to help against that. And our Lord is going to be coming back to help with this situation, since most of the range units with dwarves have been chased off at this point. Our Glade Guard have more than enough ammunition to carry out the victory, as long as they don't get caught. And given that it is just dwarves and their relatively slow movement speed, that's not going to be a problem. Our War Dancers, now moving into combat, have engaged against the Longbeards, and they can win that fight very handily. As for our Sylvan Knights, they do actually get caught up by some Slayers, just due to a little bit of a missed micro by myself. But even so, we'll be able to pull them out and throw a heal on top of them to make sure that they don't rout. Our Way Watchers can continue to run away from the Slayers. And there we go. We've successfully got our Sylvan Knights out of there. And the dwarves are starting to run out of infantry. And when you have the range advantage by spreading out your troops, you essentially make it so that you will never get caught by any single dwarf infantry. This is the same type of micro that you see in StarCraft with your Marines, just splitting up your troops so that one unit is running away and the other unit is firing. You can see a clean example of this here against the Dwarf Warriors, where this unit is able to fire basically indefinitely. Now, the Lord is Ungrim. He's unbreakable. He's going to be a little bit just a little bit annoying to actually take out, but he doesn't have any magic damage, so our Sylvan Knights will be able to kill him in the late game. We have cycle charging from our Lord and our saved ammunition on the Waystalker. GG comes in from our opponent, realizing that things are basically over at this point. The Slayers will be taking a lot of fire on top of them. We can even throw down a Soul Quench. Although this is usually less efficient, it's just closing out the game. And there we go. Pretty clean victory. This Wood Elf build, it is quite painful to go up against, especially if you don't have the right tools. Cannons are really not enough to really deal with it. And only 4 Rangers is not enough firepower to deal with this many Glade Guard and this many Way Watchers. You'll have to go sort of all in on the Rangers to counter this build. And of course that will leave you open to rushes too. So yeah, there's not a lot that they can really do. And it's going to be a clean win. We'll just check the damage values real quick. Doing pretty good, especially having not spent all of our ammunition. We are now practicing against Makep from ODM, coming back in with the Empire infantry heavy build with lots of great cannons to face up against my warp fire build of the Skaven. So goal number 1, make sure that the cannons don't get too much damage. We'll be moving our Lord and the Brood Horror to a safer position for just a second before we begin advancing. And that is what we're going to be doing, just slowly advancing, because we want our warp fire throwers and globadiers to get as much value as they possibly can. Our Lord and Brood Horror will be staying away from any of the weapon teams, so that if they do get focus fired, I don't have to worry about any missed shots hitting my weapon teams. That's going to be the goal. We'll have to be dodging cannons for a while, which sort of sucks, but that's not the worst thing in the world. Our weapon teams will be able to make it to the frontline fight too, which is Very important since there's a lot of Empire infantry to deal with. The archers too, going to be quite the task to actually handle. But as soon as the front line routes, we should be in a fairly good position. And here we go, we are getting in range, moving all of our troops in to start firing away, essentially. Our Giselles are going to be firing in, I guess, at Volkmar. Seems like a fairly good target to focus. We don't really need to take out the cannons, and not especially threatening. The Knights of the Blazing Sun, well, we have many of our troops ready to go ahead and deal with that. And with the weapon teams now in range, they are able to begin firing. Knights of the Blazing Sun do move in, and it's going to be a direct charge onto some of my warp fire throwers, and we'll be seeing in just a second why that's a bad idea. Taking about half of their HP in damage right off the bat, and a dreaded 13th in the back line just to really seal the deal. Our brood horrors are moving in, and the frontline fight has gone quite well for us so far. We can now move in our weapon teams to hit the second line of the Empire fairly easily. Volkmar will be charging in, and our goal is going to be shutting him down as quickly as we can using our many gun units. The dreaded 13th spell that has spawned our troops can now shut down the artillery, and we'll see if we can actually take out Volkmar here. He is actually quite scary. I guess we'll need the brood horror to assist in that situation, but on the plus side, we have managed to kill off most of the cavalry. Was a little bit of a worry. Brood horror slamming into Volkmar, and it will be able to quite handily win out that situation, just because it's getting a ton of fire support from the rest of my army, specifically the Rattling guns and the Giselles. Firing in at Volkmar, we'll be able to get him routed off in just a second. We're taking care of the artillery, and there we go, Volkmar with the rout. Pretty good situation. Some Globadiers coming back to only 8 units, but that's more than enough. That's more than enough to actually still get in their maximum amount of damage. And it's going to be a tap out from our opponent. A pretty solid win, I gotta say. Yeah, our build is favored against his for sure. The weapon teams essentially, they just marched up and did their thing. Just melting through the front line like it was nothing. And then from there, just cleaning up the remnants. The Empire Knights, or not the Empire Knights, the Knights of the Blazing Sun got burned to death by warp fire throwers, despite their magic resist. And from there, it was a clean victory. So here we go. Onto the second game against Amaka. We've gone a very similar build, just with a few more wolf rats. He's gone for a very similar build, this time with Eagle Claw bolt throwers, and that's gonna be it. Going to see how that goes. We're going to be marching up and dodging his shots with a little bit of back and forth. The Spirit Leech comes down on the warp fire throwers, but they're a 500 gold unit. I'm not too worried about Spirit Leeches coming down on top of them. We'll be able to dodge most of the warp fire shots, and as long as we keep an eye on those Illyrian Reavers coming in to the back line, feeling pretty confident here. So just a slow march, some Lothern Sea Guard, not especially scary, as we do have our very armored front lines. The Poison Wind Globadiers specifically are quite difficult to actually take out, so we should be good. We're going to stealth up our Triads, and it looks like an Archmage of Death has revealed themselves. Now diving in, we'll get a few shots on them, and we're going to try and shut down these Reavers as best as we can using the Wolf Rats and our guns. This will buy a little bit of time for our opponent to get into position. But there we go. The Reavers have been engaged on. They will be dying fairly quickly, and we just need to get our infantry front line engaged. I'll have to do a little bit of dancing since the Reavers are going to be a little bit of a task to take out, but once they're gone, I'm going to be feeling much more comfortable. So just throwing in some globes to hit up the front line. We'll be using another dreaded 13th to take out the Lothern Sea Guard. And there we go, we've taken out one unit of spearmen. We'll be taking out the next. The Lord will be taking a lot of damage too. It is just an Archmage of Death, they can get hunted down by the Brood Horror, and our Jezzails can slowly move up also. As for our Lord, actually getting into a little bit of a dicey situation. Nobles coming in to focus fire them. We'll try and deal with the Nobles by shooting them up with our guns, and we'll just be continuing to throw down summons into the lines of our opponent, rattling guns, kill off the Nobles, and I think the High Elf Lord should be dead in just a second. The Nobles have taken a lot of damage so far, but it's still a little bit of a dicey situation. But it's just so much gunfire, they can only dodge so much. Now, let's see, the backline does have Reavers that may come back that we'll have to worry about. But the front line of the High Elves is now beginning to collapse, not to mention the Archmage of Death is now gone. Our Lord is still doing fairly well, as long as they don't get too overrun by the Nobles. The Brood Horror specifically is going to be integral for pulling out a victory here, and our Lord does rout, but not before we manage to kill off 2 Nobles, which is basically all we need. Illyrian Reavers will be charging into my front line, but now comes a problem for the High Elves. They have routed off many of my weapon teams, but that doesn't really matter because those teams are going to be coming back, and they'll be just as effective as before they routed off. So we should be fine. The Brood Horror too running amok in the back line, our Wolf Rats doing the same, and we even have a pretty high HP unit of Globadiers that are able to take out the Spearmen and the Rangers. This one unit of Spearmen overextending too can easily take that out. And now it's just collapsing in on the front line of our opponent, or rather the back line, since the front line got pretty hard hit due to the Globadiers. So just a slow march onto them, and I think it should be a secured victory. Really sniping out those the double Nobles with all of our guns was what did it there. And even if there were single entities for the High Elves, a full HP unit of Ixcha's Triads gonna be more than enough to pull out that victory. There we go, pretty clean. And yeah, it's a really nice build if you want to play aggressively. Even though there was Spirit Leeches and 3 Bolt Throwers, our gun units were really cheap. It didn't matter that we lost a unit of Warp Fire Throwers because we had many more in reserves. Really though, the heroes today were the Globadiers, getting in a lot of value, and of course the Rattling Guns sniping things out. The Wolf Rats diving in onto the backline, amazing units if you control them well enough. And there we go, that's basically it. Yep, pretty clean, and on to the next game. So here we go, our third game against Muckup. He's going to be bringing a similar dwarf build, just some cannons and just a pretty sturdy front line, no artillery. We'll see how well our Wolf Rats do in this situation. Our Doom Players will have to be very important too, but our rather aggressive force will be able to perform quite well. It's really just that the cannons will be able to snipe out my Jezzails, which does make things a tiny bit unfortunate, but the fact that there's no gyrocopters is a nice hope for me. The gyrocopters are usually pretty annoying to deal with, and in this case our Jezzails will have fairly free reign over the situation. I guess their priority targets here are going to be the miners, that we don't have to walk into any blasting charges, and then we can also fire into the Grumbling Guard. That should be pretty fun. Doom Flayers will be moving along the flanks to deal with the cannons, same with our Death Runners, and hopefully we can catch them out. The Grumbling Guard, they are we're going to focus them first, since the miners aren't too scary. Our Wolf Rat should be able to get onto the cannons soon enough. We'll see if we can find a good position for our Death Runners. Our Jezzails should be able to get in enough damage before the cannons kill them off, where they will likely still pay for themselves. So I'm not too worried on that front. The cannons are nearly going to be getting taken care of, but I have a feeling there's some Rangers maybe hidden away somewhere. The play from my opponent is a bit strange. There we go, the Rangers do reveal themselves, but Will they be able to take out the wolf rats? Slow comes down on 1 unit. The wolf rats are fast enough where we can really micro them. The death runners are nearly onto the cannons. We'll be moving in our doom wheels too. And the wolf rats may route. They actually might fall off the map, which would be really unfortunate. But we'll continue dodging with them just to really negate the value of those rangers. Our doom wheels do finally close in on top and will likely be able to kill off the artillery pieces. From there, the Jezzails will be able to take out basically any unit that they want to, and then that should be a pretty swift victory. From there, I don't know if there's much that Muckup can really do in this situation, especially with the cannons both getting shattered now. Basically, one of the worst case scenarios for the poor Dowie. We're even going to move up Snicketch so that he can start causing some havoc in the dwarf lines. He's going to be casting the whirling weeping blades on the Longbeards, since that will be able to actually kill them rather quickly. It's a strong AoE ability, and here we go, casting it down. You can see we take off about a quarter of their HP just with the single ability. We can disengage with Snicketch to pull them out. So there we go. A pretty rough loss again from Muckup using our Skaven build. The wolf rats were actually really integral there to help kill off the cannons, and of course the doom flayers were quite painful also. There wasn't really much he could have done against this. He could have played more defensively with his cannons, but the Jezzails will actually kill them once they get close enough. So not too much he could have really done there, and unfortunately, gonna be another loss for the poor dwarves, but a win for us. But here we go. Gonna be a second rematch against our opponent. Muckup. It's going to be the same build since he wanted to rematch using his dwarves, and we're up against 3 bolt thrower crews here. Now we'll see how well they trade up against Jezzails. They should be able to trade out well, but the problem is the oh, there's even a cannon there. Interesting. But the problem is that if we can just shut down the bolt throwers, it's essentially going to be a loss, and he doesn't have any blasting charges or AoE to really kill off my death runners here. So I feel like the death runners are going to be proving quite the threat. Not to mention we have wolf rats and the doom flayers coming in along the sides. The rangers do reveal themselves, and we'll see if we can actually dive in onto them with the death runners. We may be able to get some free picks here right off the bat. That's going to be the goal. To move up with our forces. Now we'll be moving in with the Jezzails, and there we go. Some of the rangers getting impacted hard by those by the death runners on the initial charge. Definitely an opportune trade. And now we're going to see if the slayers can actually hold down the back line. I'm a little bit I'm not too confident about that situation, just because the wolf rats are so much more mobile. So they'll likely be able to outmaneuver there. Some of the heroes for my opponent are coming in, try and deal with the situation going on into the back line with Snicketch and the assassin. Going to throw down a debuff, multiple debuffs even. And then with the bolt thrower crews now exposed, it's just a matter of sending in the wolf rats to clean house there. Snicketch will be able to shut down the Rune Lord, and we can pull away with the wolf rats now, get them into a safer position. Even move in with the doom flayers, and the wolf rats get a little bit compromised. We can sort of sneak them through though, and now it's time to start summoning a lot of troops into the back line of the Dowie. It's going to be quite painful. We'll pull back the death runners into some Skaven slaves so that they trade better so that they trade a little bit better there. Our heroes are doing really well. Our summons performing quite well, and they're going to be shutting down all of these forces. We'll shoot this bolt thrower crew to death, just since it's a little bit difficult to compromise at the moment. With the Rune Lord dead, I'm feeling pretty confident here, especially since we have so many Jezzails actually at the ready. We have yet more summons coming down in just a second, and the Wolf Rats now will be able to bounce between many of these targets, causing a lot of havoc along the way. The Rangers are generally pretty low armor, and the Wolf Rats will make short work of them. Not to mention our hero squad too is nearly unkillable at this point. And we'll be using them to shut down the bolt throwers and also to fight the slayers. It's not a fully optimal trade, but the fact that we're able to shut down the slayers is quite important in this situation, as they are one of the harder dwarf units to kill, and they will be able to chase down by Jezzails too. So that's going to be the plan. We have our heroes engaging onto the bolt thrower crew. The Jezzails are firing away on slayers, and we have many summons to really cause a lot of pain in this defensive dwarf formation. Going to be another quick GG from Muckip right there, as we do overrun his lines. Essentially, he couldn't really protect his artillery. After that, the Jezzails had free reign going into the late game, and there wasn't much he could do, especially against my hero squad. Snickich, absolute beast when it comes to fighting dwarves, and in general, especially with the assassin support, was basically it. Another pretty clean victory. So just a quick check in the back line to make sure that we are not going to get hard flanked by any Dark Riders in the back. There are some along the left flank. We'll push them back with our Wolf Rats and the Brood Horror. And what do we got? A Supreme Sorceress of Death, Spirit Leech, Overcast onto my Warp Fire Throwers. Not a huge loss, like I said. They are very cheap, so we're completely fine with that. The Scourge Runner Chariots moving into range of some of my troops. We're going to pull them back a tiny bit so that our Jezzails can move into range. There we go. And we should be able to trade up effectively into that. Should work out just fine. We have our Rattling Guns too. We want to be advancing quickly to avoid these bolt throwers that are actually getting in some pretty decent damage. Just really focusing on that quick engage. Scourge Runners dancing in and out, proving a little bit of a pain, but we can get a little bit more damage in. One minor benefit here is that they will be taking a lot of damage here. They don't have any sources of healing, and because of that, the Scourge Runners, they'll eventually go down to the Jezzails if they're overzealous with their aggressive play. So we'll continue to focus fire them with the Jezzails. We'll use our Rattling Gunners to kill off the War Hydra, and our Poison Wind Mortars will be getting in onto the engage. The War Hydra now moving into a more aggressive position, looking like it will actually attempt to dive into my back line. We'll have to see how that plays out, as we're now going to start shelling it with a ton of ammunition, but our front line does actually get engaged on. The Dark Riders managed to close in onto my Warp Fire Throwers. One, I definitely would have rathered that not happen, but we're able to recover the situation by throwing down a summon onto the Dark Riders, and with the War Hydra nearly routed off, we should be in an okay situation. The Dark Riders will die very quickly to the Wolf Rats. The War Hydra has been routed, and the Dark Elf Infantry is now forced to move forwards. We've taken out their Bolt Thrower crews, and we can now start pulling back into a much safer position. The Brood Horror can deal with the Hydra fairly well. Now Wolf Rats are going to be dealing with the rest of the Bolt Throwers. Warp Fire Throwers are going to be dealing with the infantry, and we're going to force path our Brood Horror so that it can effectively chase off that War Hydra. A very, very important target to take out. The infantry for the Dark Elves is grouping up just a tiny bit here, which is very optimal for the Warp Fire Throwers. And we'll be using that to our advantage by getting this spare unit of throwers to fire in onto the flanks of the Dark Elves. and we'll be using, we'll also be splitting up our warp fire throwers so that they can effectively catch out all of the Dark Elf troops. So there we go, the Hydra is now gone. We have dealt with most of the threats here, but there is still a pretty large problem. These Scourge Runner chariots are actually pretty scary. They're able to chase down many of my troops, and we want to make sure that we can actually catch them out and kill them, because once they're down, our weapon teams can actually kite against the Dark Elf infantry. Skaven weapon teams are surprisingly fast, as I have stated before. That's going to be the plan. We also have the Brood Horror coming on back to assist in this situation, and it looks like we have actually successfully routed off the Warp Fire Throwers. So a pretty good situation. Some of the Bolt Thrower crews will come back, but that's not a huge threat, since it will take them a while, and they don't do much damage themselves anyways. We'll hit them up with the Brood Horrors just to finish them off before it comes in to deal with the Scourge Runner chariots. As for the infantry, you can see they've been taking an absolute beating from the Warp Fire Throwers, and there's just too many Skaven units to really chase for the Dark Elves. They don't really have a good chance of actually catching things out. So yeah, it's absolutely no problem, and it's gonna be another pretty clean win against Muckip. The attempt to dive in onto my backlines with the Dark Riders, sadly, not enough. One of them did actually manage to get into the cookie jar, as is how Turin would put it. But yeah, just not enough really. I also forgot to record this video, so just a message for future me to pull out this replay from Twitch so that I can combine it with my YouTube video. So here we go. Once again, going for the same Skaven build against Empire. The goal for today is to get good enough at this build where I can run it in tournaments. So just taking a look at what we have here, it's going to be Boris Todbringer coming in the sky. 4 units of cavalry and an endless tide of flagellants and swordsmen. Pretty nice Empire build, but it's only 10 units of infantry, and scarily enough, we have 6 units of anti-infantry and 4 units of Skaven slaves to really hold up the front line. So we're not especially worried here. Not to mention we have Wolf Rats and Brood Horrors at the ready, a unit of Eshin Triads to cover the right flank in case the Empire Knights decide to dive in. And that's going to be the plan. Just moving up with our Skaven slaves to block them up. Then we'll be turning our Warp Fire Throwers to deal with the Empire Knights. The Zales will be able to move in and pressure too against the cavalry, and we'll be moving in our Brood Horror to support. Now Boris, he is going to be coming in. Suicidal charge possibly coming in from Boris. The cavalry sneaking around the sides, doing fairly well, but we're going to slow down Boris now. We're going to focus fire him with the Jezzails. We're going to melt down all the knights, and the glorious charge of the Empire has basically been halted here. Boris is looking in pretty rough shape, I gotta say. He no longer exists at this point. And now it's the front line of the Empire. Will they be able to hold? We have the dreaded 13th spell. We're going to throw that down. Hit up some flagellants to start off. Our Wolf Rats are going to be chasing off the rest of the cavalry, and the Rattling Guns will be able to perform quite well too. We'll sandwich those guys in infantry. We have the Ixcha's Triads moving in too. We'll even throw down their Illusion over here, but just a little bit slow on the draw. They won't be able to throw that down, sadly enough. It is very important. And that is a tiny misplay by me, but at this point it doesn't really matter. If you look at the Empire forces, they have been absolutely overrun. Or really just shot to death by the mass guns that we have here. The Wolf Rats can do cleanup easily on all of the flagellants and so on. Poison Wind Mortars, we're going to have them fire in combat, since they can actually sometimes do that. And it's just cleaning up now. The left flank will have to retreat, but our Globadiers can still fire regardless. And we've secured a very strong position here along the other flank. Flagellants, an optimal unit at shutting down the weapon teams because they don't rout, will get cleaned up by wolf rats. And here we go. It's just a couple Empire Knights left. We'll hit them up with the Rattling Guns. Our Ixcha's Triads too are moving in. And we even have some summons throw down to deal with all these forces. We're going to throw one more volley at the Flagellants to really clean up the Empire forces. And then we should be good. A little bit of a weird UI problem here. But it doesn't matter. Because yeah. Essentially we just punished Boris there for his engagement and then killed off all the cavalry. One major mistake that you can make is charging head first into the warp fire throwers, because they actually do kill Empire Knights extremely quickly. The Rattling Guns too will kill Boris. We used the slow on him and very little damage from him. Infantry not too threatening either. And that's gonna be GG. Oh my gosh.